panacea for all of society's problems, but this is one that's easy to focus on.
So how do you change the leadership dynamic? Talk a little bit about your experience in New York, where this year, remarkably, you've got the lowest crime rate since the 60s.
I don't think it's remarkable because I think we're doing the right things. We have sensible gun laws, we have proactive policing, and we incarcerate people when they're dangerous to society with tough punishment.
There's also some of the searching methods that have been controversial and have been criticized.
Proactive policing. We send our police officers to problem places where there are problem people. We focus our efforts where there is crime, and we make sure that the people who might commit those crimes know that there's a high probability that we will find them carrying weapons and they'll go to jail. We have the toughest gun laws in the country. 3.5-year mandatory sentence in jail is state law if you found carrying an illegal loaded gun. All of those things scare people from carrying guns, but the people that they scare are not the hunters. They're not the people who want to have guns to protect themselves in their homes. Those things are guaranteed by the Constitution and guaranteed by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court also said that you can have reasonable restrictions. Carrying guns on a college campus, for example, is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of in my life. I don't remember what you were like when you were in college, but I shouldn't have had a gun when I was in college, nor should anybody I knew. We just don't need guns every place. We don't need people carrying guns in public places. That's not what the Founding Fathers had in mind. It doesn't add to anybody's safety. Quite the contrary. It makes us have a much more dangerous society.
So how do you change the leadership dynamic? Connecticut's got a very strong set of gun laws. An assault weapons ban that ironically did not cover the weapon used in this case, apparently. They tried to limit the high capacity clips, and they faced tremendous pressure. They weren't able to do that, but they still had tough laws. So how do you change the dynamic? And you say that this does change automatically.
The first thing is having tough laws is one thing. Enforcing those laws is something different. Legislators' job is to come up with laws, to come up to agreements, get everybody into a room, form a bipartisan coalition, get everybody something, most of them get the majority, get the most of it. An executive's job is to make a decision. An executive's job is to take the law and go out and apply it given the intent of the law. And that's exactly what we do in New York City. The fact that we have the lowest murder rate of any big city in the country says we know what we're doing. And we have it every year. We have had a reduction in murder rate virtually every single year for the last 20 years.
As the leader of a huge city in America, New York City, what about the role of other people, our mental health professionals, law enforcement people?
All over the place.
What is the role? What about gun owners and gun rights supporters? What role do they have in this, if there's to be a new dialogue?
Well, I think gun owners really have spoken. When you do the polling, most gun owners think that an assault weapons ban makes sense in this day and age. That study has been done again and again by both Republican and Democratic pollsters. And the trouble is that the N.R.A. is just never willing to have any restriction whatsoever, no matter how reasonable it is. The Supreme Court, fortunately, was. They said having reasonable restrictions is consistent with the Constitution.
Does that dynamic change now? Does the N.R.A. have disproportionate power? You argued a moment ago that they didn't have the power they once had in the presidential.
I'll give you a good example. I'm not the kind of person to sit back and say, you know, the world's getting worse for my kids, and when I'm gone, I don't care about their lives. I do care about their lives. I'm going to do everything I can while I'm alive to make the world a better place for my kids, but also for society. And you take a look, one of the things they decided to do in this last election was to support some candidates that were running against those that had great records with the N.R.A. Where the N.R.A. was putting their money into one side, I decided to put my money into the other side.
Joe Baca in California, one of those Democrats that you tried.
We won 4 out of 7. 4 out of 7 where the N.R.A. supported every one of those 4, and we won with a small amount of money. There is this myth that the N.R.A. so powerful. You go back to what happened back when the Democrats lost after the assault weapons ban. I don't know that the two are connected then, but today the NRA's power is so vastly overrated. The public, when you do the polls, they want to stop this carnage. And if 20 kids isn't enough to convince them, I don't know what would.
So the top priorities in terms of gun control as of today are to reinstate state
Well, I don't know that
weapons
you
ban?
keep saying control. I think it's a bad word. What about regulations? What about sensible gun laws that limit what you can do, when you can do it, make it consistent with the Constitution, but also don't jeopardize everybody? And that's in fact
So
what
just take off the ones that you fight for if you were the president.
Well, if I would fight for, I would, number one, there is a loophole in the federal law requirement that says you have to have a background check. The loophole is called the gun show loophole. There was this concept that at a gun show, if you wanted to sell one gun and I just wanted to buy one gun, we wouldn't go through a background check because it was too complex. Number one, it isn't complex. Both of us could use a gun dealer. 99% of the gun dealers in this country do background checks, follow the law exactly to the letter. It's not onerous and it really does work. But the gun shows have evolved from just you selling one gun to me to you having 500 guns and 10 or 20 like me come in to buy guns from you. It's a ways to avoid the federal requirement for a background check. Number two, the background check database isn't kept up to date. And the president, by executive order, could certainly do something like that. When there was a disaster, murder, 6-8 months, a year ago, a military guy. The military knew he had psychiatric problems, never put that into the database. Outside of the military, goes and kills people. So populating the database, making sure that you stop the gun show loophole, those are the kinds of things that Congress can do. And enforcing the laws. The Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division hasn't had anybody in half a dozen years running it, 4 years. President hasn't fought hard for somebody. I know it's tough to get people through Congress, approved in Congress. President deals with that all the time. This should be one of his number one priorities.
How much are you prepared to spend in the future to counter the N.R.A.?
Well, I don't know how to answer that, but when I care about something, I care about something. I think I have an obligation as an American and as a citizen, as a human being, to help others. Smoking is going to kill 1 billion people this century. I put $600 million of my own money into trying to stop the tobacco companies from getting kids to smoke and convincing adults that it's not in their health. That's one issue. Who knows with this?
So you're prepared to put a lot more money to support stricter gun regulations?
Wouldn't it be wonderful if we didn't have to do that? Wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody just said, okay, let's just have some common sense here. We don't need assault weapons, military-style weapons with big magazines on the streets of our city. And we've got to make sure that people who don't have the maturity or the capacity, mental capacity to responsibly handle guns, don't have them.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it very much.
It's very tragic.
A note here this morning.